Chapter 3 of Tractate Bava Metzia continues on further laws on the recovery and returning of lost or stolen objects. The first mention says, if somebody deposits an animal or vessels with somebody, an unpaid guardian, and the item gets lost or stolen, the guardian can either repay the value of the item and not need to take an oath that he was not negligent, or he can take such an oath and then be released from liability of payment. If the thief is found, the thief must pay double. If it was a sheep or an ox and the thief slaughtered or sold it, he must pay excess 4 times or 5 times, and the payment goes to the guardian if he had repaid the owner for the item. If the guardian hadn't repaid the owner and had taken an oath that he wasn't responsible, the excess double or 4 or 5 times payments would go to the original owner. The Gemara says it mentioned both an animal and a vessel, as animals are difficult to carry and care for, so it shows the payments are the same for both. It discusses this point further. It's debated if it's sufficient for the guardian to just agree to pay for the stolen animal for him to acquire any later returning payments, meaning to not actually pay it, he's only consenting to, verbally. Similarly, if the guardian agrees that he was negligent and accepts responsibility, future payments would go to him, as they would if he was a paid guardian who states that the item was stolen, accepting responsibility. A borrower who lost an item would not be able to choose to pay and thereby acquire any future recompense. A borrower could only exempt himself from payment if he says something unusual to destroy the item, such as the animal died during the course of ordinary work. Others say a borrower actually would acquire any future payments if he agrees to pay, and according to others, when he actually pays it. It debates this from various sources. It is agreed if a guardian initially refuses to pay and then agrees to. If the thief pays a double payment, it goes to the guardian, as he had eventually agreed to pay for the stolen item. However, if the guardian initially agreed to pay for it and then refused to, it debates if this is considered to be retracting his statement, removing it, or only postponing it. It's a similar debate if the guardian agreed to pay for the stolen item and then passed, and his sons then refused to. It's a debate if this is a retraction or only a postponing. Additionally, if the father passes and the sons do end up paying for the item, it's a debate if the owner is obligated to transfer the rights to the sons also, when he had only agreed to do so by the father. There are several other particularly posed scenarios which all go unresolved. It's debated as to why and when exactly a guardian would need to take an oath. This is discussed further. There's a case a man gave jewels to a guardian, and later the guardian claimed he wasn't sure what happened to the jewels. It was ruled that this was considered to be negligent and he had to repay. The guardian refused to pay, and it was said that the sum could be taken from the guardian's property. The jewels were then eventually found and had increased in value, so were returned and the guardian got back his property. This is different from the established principle of a guardian who refused to take responsibility through an oath, as the guardian here inconvenienced the owner to go to court. It is ruled if somebody in debt had his item appraised and then confiscated, when it's eventually returned after he repays his debt, the actual confiscated item must be returned. It qualifies these points. If a creditor repossessed a borrower's land, it's a debate between a number of opinions when he can consume the produce from the land, whether from when he receives a document of authorization, whether it's from the signing of the document, or otherwise. New Mishnah. If somebody rented a cow and then lent it to a different borrower, and the cow died in an ordinary manner, the renter would take an oath as to how things occurred, and the borrower would repay the renter. Others say the value of the cow is actually repaid to the original owner. The Gemara explains the renter here would be acquiring the animal as it dies, and he takes an oath to assure the owner as to how it died. It poses a case if a renter rents a cow for 100 days, and then the owner borrows it back for 90 days, and then the renter rents it for 80 days, and the owner then borrows it back for 70 days, and the animal dies within the 7-day period. For every time the animal is borrowed, the owner owes 1 cow. It debates this from other opinions. Additional related cases are discussed, and these are qualified further. It debates further if we hold in accordance with the opinion that if a guardian pays for a lost deposit and he doesn't take an oath, the thief's double payment would nevertheless go to the owner, which is based on the Mishnah's wording. New Mishnah. If a man admits to 2 people that he stole 100 dinarim from one of them, but he's just not sure which, or that one of their fathers had deposited 100 coins with him, but he's just not sure which, he would be obligated to give 100 dinarim to both of them. This is because he's not sure who he owes the money to, but he admitted his guilt by himself, so he's liable to pay both of them. If 2 men deposited money to one man, one depositing 100 dinarim and the other 200, and then they both claim that they deposited the 200 dinarim, the guardian should give 100 dinarim to both of them, and then just hold the doubtful 100 coins in stasis until Mashiach comes. Others disagree, saying the attempted thief here has no loss, so he'd say the entire amount should be held in stasis until Mashiach comes. Similarly, if 2 people deposit vessels with somebody, one worth 100 dinarim and the other worth 1,000, and then they both claim they deposited the more expensive vessel. The guardian should give the cheaper vessel to one and take proceeds from the expensive one and give the value of the cheaper vessel and then keep the remainder from the expensive vessel in stasis until Mashiach comes. Others say again, the attempted thief here would have no loss, so he'd say the entire amount of everything should be held in stasis until Mashiach comes. The Gemara suggests, based on the initially established case from the Mishnah, that in cases of uncertainty, evidently, the money does not just stay with its current owner, rather it's divided up, which is by a deposit, and then is contradicted by the latter case of the Mishnah. It debates this from other sources, including a point from Tractate, where it says that if a thief has 5 people claiming he owes them money, he should just leave the amount to be split between them, which is seemingly contradictory, so it's explained there. The others are demanding payment, but in our Mishnah, where he's paying everybody in full, it's where he's voluntarily choosing to pay everybody, as implied by the Mishnah itself. It discusses this further, citing additional sources from other locations. New Mishnah, if somebody deposits produce with a guardian, even if the item starts spoiling, he shouldn't touch it. Others say he should just sell it before a court so as to be able to save the produce as if he's returning the item. The Gemara explains, the reason the first opinion holds he shouldn't replace the produce is either because generally people prefer their own produce than that of others, or the concern is that the second produce will be improperly tithed or otherwise made impure. Others debate the second issue as a concern. Additionally, the Mishnah's debate as to whether he should sell the produce is where the produce deteriorates at its standard rate. If it deteriorates faster than normal, it's agreed he should sell it before a court. It argues further as to what the circumstance is regarding if the concern is it being others' produce, or if the concern is that it's improperly tithed produce. It debates further as to which opinion we hold, like as to whether the produce should be sold to be returned or not. This is discussed further, and there are related points on laws of property authorization. It brings a particular case. A woman had 3 daughters. She and one of her daughters were then taken captive, and one of the daughters had passed, leaving a minor son. So it's a debate where the property of the woman goes. The issue with it going to her daughter is that the woman could have possibly died in captivity, so her minor grandchild would then inherit from her, and the court doesn't authorize a relative to manage the boy's property. The issue with it going to the minor grandson is that it's possible the woman did not die in captivity, and the court does not authorize a minor to manage property of a captive. Some hold half goes to the daughter and half to a supervisor who will hold on to it for the son. Others say a supervisor just holds on to everything until the status of the woman is defined and known. In the particular case, it was eventually confirmed that the woman died, and some said a third goes to the surviving daughter, a third goes to the minor grandchild, and the last third, which should theoretically go to the captive daughter, is split, half of this third going to the remaining daughter and the other part going to a supervisor for the minor. Others hold the supervisor holds onto both halves of the captive daughter's sum. Another case is brought. An individual showed up to a town, went to a particularly wealthy man and claimed to be his long-lost brother, and demanded half of his property that he'd inherit. The wealthy man claimed to have no knowledge of this man. It was said, based on the whole incident with Joseph from the Torah, it's known that a man could just end up not recognizing his brothers, so it was said that the man claiming to be a brother had to bring witnesses for that fact. Eventually, witnesses were brought proving that he was the man's brother, and the property was divided accordingly. And as the brother was a minor, it was ruled that the property was divided, and if there were enhancements made to the property, it was divided and split. New Mishnah, if somebody deposits produce with another and the guardian returns a different produce, needs to repay the standard expected decreased amount of reduction in the produce from mice or otherwise. The standard produce loss ratios were for wheat and rice, 9.5 kav per 180 kav, which was an old form of measurement. For barley and millet, it was 9 kav per 180 kav. For spelt and flaxseed, it was 18 kav per 180 kav, according to its amount and time lapsed. Others agree and say that mice don't really care how much produce there is when they eat, so it doesn't go according to a ratio, it goes according to a set amount. Others say if it was a large amount of produce, there's no concern of standard produce loss, as the produce will actually increase, which will be explained. The Gemara qualifies these ratios for different types of produce, and it clarifies that those are the standard ratios per year. The answer to the opinion that mice would typically eat a set amount regardless of the ratios is that it discounts the amount of produce that gets additionally scattered. Furthermore, these produce loss calculations are only made if the produce was mixed with the guardian's own, and the guardian took an unknown amount. If they were set aside fully, the guardian could just say it's the depositor's loss if mice gets into them. Regarding a large measure, which is defined as 1800 kav, This would not have reduction calculated, as it could actually increase. For instance, if it's returned in the rainy season and the grain swells slightly, increasing the volume. New Mishnah. Similarly to the above, if liquids are being returned, there is an amount deducted for the standard loss over time, here through absorption and evaporation, of either a sixth or a fifth of the amount of wine, depending on the opinion. There's 3 lugs, which was an old measurement, of oil deducted for every 100 lug. There's 1.5 for sediment and 1.5 for absorption. If it was refined oil, there's no deduction for sediment. If the oil was stored in old saturated casks, there's no deduction for absorption. Others say there is a sediment deduction for refined oil. The Gemara says the debate if wine reduction is a sixth or a fifth. That's not a debate, it's just variance between different locales based on what material barrels were coated with. It further discusses these ratio calculations. Regarding old saturated casks, some say they do not absorb at all, as the barrels are also coated with pitch. Others say they're just fully saturated and can't absorb anything further. It further debates the opinions if there's sediment reduction by refined oil from some additional sources. New Mishnah. If somebody stored a barrel with a guardian in a non-specific location within his house, and the guardian then moves the barrel, and it breaks as he does so, if he moved it for his own sake, then he's liable. But if he moved it for the sake of the barrel, to protect it for instance, and it broke, he'd be exempt. If he had moved the barrel, and then it broke for whatever reason, he's exempt. If the owner had put the barrel in a designated specific place in his house, whether it broke as he moved it or after he'd moved it, he's liable if he moved it for himself, and exempt if it was to protect the barrel. The Gemara cites opinions this is in accordance with. It additionally qualifies the various opinions on this topic. There's also a debate as to whether if somebody impermissibly used an item, if he's now fully responsible for it and any damage that comes to it. For instance, normally if a shepherd is watching sheep and then leaves and then something outside his control occurs, like wolves appearing and eating the sheep, he's not responsible. However, if he had leaned his shepherd's staff on one of the sheep and it was attacked, he had made use of the item, so essentially he had accepted responsibility for it. So the case is actually defined that he struck the animal with his staff and weakened it, which means this opinion holds that misappropriating an item requires that there be a loss of some sort. Others debate this opinion. It argues this further. New Mishnah. If somebody deposited coins with a guardian, and the guardian did not do a very good job of keeping them safe, doing something like binding them in a cloth and slinging it behind him, or leaving them with his minor child, or locking them behind a door that's not very secure, he's liable for any loss or damages. If he did safeguard them properly, he's exempt. The Gemara explains all of the above listed methods of guarding money are considered to be improper, and slinging the coins in a cloth behind is improper as it should be held in your hands. It cites related points on guarding and protecting money. Some say the only proper way to guard money is to bury it. If somebody receives money just before Shabbos and then waits a while after Shabbos to bury the money and doesn't do immediately when he's allowed to, he would be liable. It would be permissible to delay if the owner of the money was a Torah scholar who perhaps needed the money for the Havdalah service, so it wouldn't need to be buried immediately. However, it eventually became common for thieves to dig around to find hidden money and also to search roof beams, so it's said to be proper to guard money by storing it inside of the wall, specifically near the ground or near the ceiling, where people wouldn't be able to check for hollow spots in the walls. It gives other instances of properly storing money and also rules. If the circumstances that the money was hidden in a somewhat negligent manner and then it was lost due to an accident, the guardian would be liable. It discusses a number of related incidents on this. New Mishnah. If a person deposits money with a money lender, but bound and sealed, the money lender cannot use it and would not be responsible for it. If it was unbound, the money lender can use it and is responsible for it. If the money was deposited with a non-money lender, just a typical person, he can't use it no matter what, so he's not responsible for it. Regarding a storekeeper, it's a debate if he has the status of a typical person or of a money lender. The Gemara says the money lender can't use the bound money as it's sealed, so clearly it can't be used. It's a debate if this refers to a money bag being sealed with an atypical knot. He would be responsible if the money was unbound, which would include things like losing the item, such as in a shipwreck. It debates the circumstance of these cases. New Mishnah. If somebody impermissibly used somebody's deposit, Beis Shammai says he's penalized for any increase or decrease in the funds. Beis Hillel says he must repay the funds according to the time it was removed. Rabbi Akiva says he must repay the funds according to the time of the claim. The Gemara says, some say if a man steals a barrel of wine worth 1 dinar, and it goes up in value to 4 dinarim, if the thief broke or drank it himself, he needs to repay 4 dinarim, and if the barrel broke by itself, he must repay 1 dinar. As was mentioned in Tractate Bava, the prior tractate, a stolen item must be repaid according to when it was stolen. It qualifies the remaining opinions. It does say the law accords with Rabbi Akiva that the fund is repaid according to the time time of the claim, although it said that if there were witnesses at the time, it would be paid according to the time of deposit. Others do say it's like the opinion of Beis Hillel. New Mishnah. If somebody wants to impermissibly use a deposit, Beis Shammai says he's just liable for any damages if he voices this desire. Beis Hillel says he's only liable if he actually impermissibly uses it. If somebody had a barrel of wine deposited by him, and he tilts it and drinks a quarter lug of wine, and the barrel breaks, he repays only for what he took. If he actually lifts up the entire barrel, he's acquired all of it, effectively, so if he drinks a quarter lug and the barrel breaks, he needs to repay for the whole thing. The Gemara cites sources for these opinions. Additionally, these points on repaying for a barrel are if it broke. If it's spoiled, that's a direct result of his action, so he'd be responsible for all of it. Some clarify if somebody lifts the barrel of wine in order to drink some and acquires it, he's liable if it breaks, even if he hasn't actually drunk any of it yet. This is, as the small amount he wanted to drink is benefited by the entire barrel and all of the wine surrounding it, so he acquires the whole thing. It does ask if lifting a purse to take a single coin from the purse is comparable at all to this, possibly as a purse is more easily guarded than single coins, so they're benefited by the total amount, but it's left unresolved. And that's the end of chapter 3.